All right. Well, let's get rolling. If people trickle in, that's fine. Before we get started, I want to make a couple of announcements. So first, as you can see from the slide up here, this is a session about women in tech and how to be an ally. So if this is not where you intended to be, this is your opportunity to walk out. And yes, feel free to leave, vote with your feet anytime during the talk. I will not take it personally. At least I will try not to take it personally. The second thing that I want to say is that I am a senior director at Chewy, but everything you hear from me today is just my personal opinion based on my lived experiences and what I've heard from other women that I've worked with. So these are not the views of my employer. They're not endorsed by Chewy in any form. If you do want to learn more about the organization, I would be happy to chew your ear off, pun intended, after the session. So come find me. I can talk to you about Chewy all day long, tell you about our wonderful offices downtown in Minneapolis, Fifth Street Towers, and all the hiring that we are doing here. You won't hear me talk about that again for the rest of this session. The third thing that I want to say is, when I put this talk together, I wanted to focus on women in tech because I could speak to that from my experience. However, everything that I say, you can also apply to any minority or underrepresented group. So as I'm going through this talk, you will not hear me say women and underrepresented groups, right? Women and minorities. Whenever you hear me say women, in your mind, just add on underrepresented groups to that. And the talk itself is going to be about just some tips that all of you as allies can take back and incorporate into your daily life. So even if you take back just one thing at the end of this, I'm going to count that a success. All right, so with that, who the heck am I? All right. I was born and raised in India, in southern India, state of Tamil Nadu, for those of you who are familiar with the geography, same state as Chennai, maybe you're familiar with Chennai. I went to school, college in a neighboring state of Karnataka, where I majored in environmental engineering. Towards my third year of college, these companies came through for tech, for recruiting, especially the tech giants, the consulting giants in India. And I was lucky enough to land a job with Infosys, one of the largest consulting companies out of India. And I decided to take it because I needed the money, and I didn't know what else to do with my environmental engineering degree. So that tech job gave me the opportunity not just to get into life as a developer and learn how to build systems, but it gave me the opportunity to travel the world, which was pretty neat. I started off in the Asia Pacific region, and had a chance to visit a few countries there before I came to the United States, of all places to Minnesota, and I've never left. So it's been more than 20 years. So I consider myself pretty much a native now. Some other words that I use to describe myself, I'll let you read through them. I'm not going to read through all of that for you. But as you're looking at that, you probably see the word dog, cat, and yes, my husband and I have a couple of each. That's my pet tax, our 2 cats and the 2 dogs. And the proportion in that collage there represents the power dynamics among the 4 of them, right? The 2 cats put together weigh about 20 pounds. And the 2 dogs put together weigh about 140 something pounds. But yeah, the cats rule the house. My husband and I are there as caretakers. So that's me. You will notice that I didn't put up any company logos up there. But if you're curious, I'm of course currently at Chewy, but then before that I was at United Health Group for about 6.5 years or so with various parts of Optum. And then before that, I was at Target for more than a dozen years. So I've done my share of the usual revolving doors in the Twin Cities. Although Chewy is definitely new and exciting. All right, so then to kind of get into the meat of what I want to talk about, before I get to tips, I want to spend a few minutes talking about what women want in the workplace, that is. And I won't tell you my answers. By the way, everything that I share with you is just like my opinion. There are a number of women in this audience, which I love to see. They'll all have their own opinions. We may not always agree, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt. But before I show you my answers to this question, can I ask the audience, what do you think we want in our careers? Yeah, you don't have to raise your hand, just yell them out. Somebody said equal opportunity. Who was that? Thank you. Fulfillment. Being taken seriously. You said something. To be heard. Equal pay. I'm a huge proponent of equal pay. What else? Flexibility. Yes, great. Leadership. Yep. Those were all great answers, by the way. All right, so let me share my opinion, and you will hopefully see all of your answers reflected in what I show here. We want to be treated fairly. Somebody said equal, somebody said equal pay. I group all of that under treated fairly, right? We want to be treated the same as everybody else, right? We want to be heard, to have a voice at the table, to have a seat at the table. What does having a seat at the table mean to some of you?
Be involved in decision making?
Be involved in decision making. I do not want to be a bystander. I do not want to have things happen to me. I want to be part of the process. I want to be treated the same as every other decision maker based on my merits. And I want a seat at that table where the action is, right? Grow in our careers. So all of us, regardless of whether you're starting out, fresh out of college or boot camp, or you're maybe mid-level or you're an executive, we all want to learn, and that's what keeps things fresh. And we all want to know that where we are is helping us grow in some way. However you define growth. Growth is not always climbing the corporate ladder. I want to make sure that we are clear about that. It could be new experiences, new assignments, new opportunities. We all want to grow. So of all the things that I've said here, who doesn't want any of that? You don't have to be a woman to want that. Is any of that surprising? No. Women we're not like these hard to fathom magical creatures that, you just don't know what we're thinking and you have to guess and you're going to get it wrong. And no, we just want the same things that everybody else in a professional career wants, right? So what I want to do today is then take each one of these categories and give you a few tips that you can take back and incorporate in your professional life. So we'll do, so that's basically the theme of the rest of my talk. What can I do as an ally? So let's talk about treated fairly. When you came in, you saw that embarrassingly giant picture of me on screen with my hands crossed like this. Does anybody know what this is? Anybody recognize this? Yes, in the back.
Break the bias.
Break the bias. Of course a woman answered that question, right? And no, it's not Wakanda Forever. It's break the bias. Break the bias was the theme for this year's International Women's Day on March 8th. So you might have seen, if you were paying attention to social campaigns, you might have seen a lot of pictures of women in that post. Bias is really, we could spend all day talking about it and still not plumb the depths. So what I will say is this. Well, before I say it, raise your hand if you think you're unbiased. Good answer. Very good answer. There were no hands up. We are human beings. As human beings, we are biased, right? It just, that's how we are wired. When you saw the picture of my pets, how many of you had a positive reaction? All of you are biased. Right? You meet somebody who has pets and you meet somebody else at work who does not. Who are you going to identify with more? What if those two people were up for promotion? You think this innocuous bias will not come into play? And I just use that as an example to show you just how insidious bias can be. We cannot avoid it. And that was a trivial example, but think about gender, think about race, think about age. We all make those snap judgments. We have affinity towards those who share some traits with us, and that can carry over into our decision making at work, which can be hugely impactful, particularly if you're a people leader who does have control over others' careers. So what I want you to take away from that first point there is almost every organization's HR has training about bias. If they don't, start a petition to have them offer one. Go take that training. Be conscious of your biases. There are tests that you can take to figure out what your biases are, and those answers might surprise you. So be conscious of it and be conscious and make a conscious decision to, whenever you make an important call in your professional life, check yourself for bias. That's what I want to leave you with on that first topic. Right? Again, we're all human beings, we're all biased by nature. The question is, can we recognize that bias and can we stop it from influencing our decision making? The next thing I want to talk about is being equitable and accessible and building that culture on your teams. Now, just like how we are all flawed human beings, we also happen to live in a very flawed society which has gendered norms, gendered roles all around us. Women bear the lion's share of caring for elders, raising children, doing household work. We all know this, right? And sometimes what happens, well, not sometimes, a lot of the times, what happens is we let those gendered norms invade our workspace, invade how we operate as a team. As an example, your team is planning, let's say, an outing. Who gets to do the logistics if you have a woman on the team? She's good at it. Let her do it. It's their thing. Right? Who takes notes when you're in meetings? She raised her hand. Does your team take turns? No. Not always. Why did she have to take notes? And so these are just trivial examples of the ways in which we can look at how we run our teams and raise our hand to say, well, these women are not being paid anymore to schedule meetings, to take notes, to organize company picnics, right? I mean, if you're being paid more to do that, please tell me where you work. So let's make sure that we're being equitable about these household tasks, right? These housekeeping tasks. Let's take turns. And speaking of accessible, I think there were many things that were terrible about the pandemic, of course. But one of the things that it made us all do was to think about accessibility, enable people working from home. And now that also meant that conferences became virtual, so people who couldn't travel because they had small kids, elderly parents, other circumstances, maybe they're disabled, could now access venues and events and things that were previously was a high bar to entry. So when you're scheduling that next happy hour at 8 o'clock or like a team dinner at 7:30 in the evening, think about who can attend those and who you are excluding by assuming that people have the same social lives. So just simple things that you can keep in mind about equity and accessibility. All of you are here, so I'm assuming that you all want to learn and learn from each other about this topic. So you're already interested. The hardest thing is challenging others. The easy thing is saying, I want to make a difference. The hard thing is calling someone out when you see bad behavior. Right? So the next time you see somebody say, she can take meeting notes, I want you to speak up and say, hey, that feels like something we should rotate on the team. Let's all take turns. Right? Or if somebody says, yeah, she's a woman, let's let her order lunch. I want you to speak up. And these are very trivial examples. A much more impactful example is during promotion conversations, you will notice other people's bias come out, and you will notice people make a big deal out of perceived gaps in women's abilities to the cost of their promotion. I want you to speak up if you're at that table in that room. Challenge others, get comfortable doing it, do it respectfully, don't be a jerk. You'll hurt the cause if you are. But do it respectfully and do it often. So those were just some of the things for, treat it fairly. Let's move on to seat at the table. The first thing that I want you to think about is who does get a seat at the table. It's usually people who are recognized as experts in whatever happens to be talked about at that table. Right? And so when you think about building that expertise, a lot of it has to do with recognition. If you see a woman doing a good job, please speak up and let not just her know. Definitely you should do that. But also let the rest of your team know, let your leaders know. That's how you build a reputation. Right? And oftentimes we just don't do this enough. We don't do this enough for everybody, just period. And then women tend to not get vocal recognition just more often. And again, remember, when I say women, in your mind you're going to add what? Underrepresented minorities. So you're paying attention. I was wondering, after the lunch break, how many people are listening. But you guys are good. Cool. Yeah. So we don't get enough recognition. So make sure when you see somebody doing a good job, speak up and let them know, and more importantly, let the people around you know. That's how you build their professional reputation. In that vein, be an advocate for your peers. If somebody comes to you, sometimes expertise is very much, there's like real expertise, and then there's like perceived expertise, right? And sometimes maybe your expertise is perceived, and a woman, a peer of yours, who's the real expert in something. If an opportunity comes your way and you think that she's better suited, advocate for her. Don't be afraid to say, this sounds like a great opportunity, but who might do a better job at it than me? It's this other person. Very often we fall into the trap of thinking that these are zero-sum games, right? That if I advocate for somebody else, I'm missing out. No, what you're doing is you're building talent, you're being inclusive, and you will be recognized for it if you're in the right spot, the right organization. If diversity really matters to them, they will recognize what you're doing. And you will build a reputation for not just for being inclusive, but as the person to go to who can point people in the right direction when it comes to talent and expertise, which is good for your career, for your own personal careers. So think about advocating for your peers. I will also say this, sometimes some women will tell you, I know what I'm doing, I don't need you to talk for me, get out of my way. If you run into one of them, get out of their way, they know what they're doing. Right. So a little bit of this is you have to apply your common sense on when to apply those tips or not. And then the last thing is, when you do see women at the table, please listen actively. For the sake of everything that you believe in, do not interrupt us. Do not talk over us. We don't enjoy it. Nobody enjoys it. Don't just listen, like pretend to go through the motions of listening, but really all you're doing is waiting for your turn to say something, which is very often repeating what the woman just said and then claiming victory, right? My idea. Doesn't matter if she just said that 5 minutes ago. This happened to any of the women in the room, by the way? Raise your hand. People turn around and look. And by the way, I'll raise my hand too. Yeah. So when they are there, please do listen actively, and actively as in seeking to understand. And of course, you can counter, but first seek to understand and lift up voices that are not often heard. If you find that somebody is having a challenge being included in the conversation, be the person that invites them in, right? Interrupt and say, hey, I think, it's okay sometimes to say, hey, I think she's trying to say something, go ahead and speak. What is not okay to do is, I think she's trying to say that, and go ahead and interpret what she said, right? No, she can speak for herself. She may need a little help to be invited into the conversation. So listen actively, promote inclusivity in dialogues. So that's seat at the table, not being a bystander, being part of those meaningful conversations. So let's move on to grow in our careers. So the first thing I want to touch on here is, I want you all to think about being a sponsor. Anybody here know the difference between a sponsor and a mentor? I'm having a hard time hearing you. Yes, yes. So in case you didn't hear him, he said not just mentoring, but providing material support. So I'll take that further and say a sponsor is somebody who can help you advance in your career, who can open doors for you that you cannot for yourself. A mentor is someone whom you're working with to develop certain skills, who you may use as a sounding board, but a sponsor can make material differences in your career. They often may be at tables that you have not yet reached. They may be a couple levels above you, and they can be a voice for you at that table, advocating for you. Now, mentors are fairly easy to find. You see someone who embodies what you want to be, embodies a trait that you want to learn. You can go up to them and say, hey, well, I really like how you do these things. Can you help me learn? And chances are they'll say yes. But a sponsor is something that you have to earn. When somebody sponsors you, they are putting their professional reputation at stake. And they cannot do that for just about everybody. So you have to show through consistent performance, through consistent delivery, that they can sponsor you and not have that blowback on them and their career growth. Right, so sponsorship is earned through sustained performance, through building a relationship with that person over a period of time, and by earning their trust. But each one of us, whether we are individual contributors or people managers, by the way, everything that I have said so far applies to you regardless of whether you're a people manager or an individual contributor. These are all things that we can all do. You can be a sponsor to somebody regardless of whether you're a people leader or not. Maybe you're a senior engineer and you see a promising, an entry-level engineer. You can open doors for them. You can give them the right assignments to help them grow. You can, build their reputation by recognizing their efforts and their expertise. So be a sponsor and try to, again, like I said, you don't want to put your own reputation at stake, so you have to be careful about who you want to speak for. But don't hesitate to be that advocate for somebody to help make a difference in their careers if you feel that they have demonstrated that they've earned it. Right? So definitely, something for you to keep in mind as you think about beyond mentoring. Now, this one particularly applies if you are a people leader. Talent mobility. Very often, people will come into an organization, they interview for a particular team, a particular product, and then, they put in their time there. They reach a point where they are like, I'm not learning anything more. I want to do something different. Or maybe they didn't quite fit that, but they didn't like what they were doing, and they want to do something different to continue their career growth. Please support them moving within the organization. Find the right next role for them that will keep them challenged, that will help them to grow. And if they come to you and tell you that they have found that role, support them in that movement. Sometimes people leaders get so obsessed with, I'm losing talent, that they stop to think about the fact that if I don't grow my team, they will leave the company. And then it's a loss not just to my team, but to the organization. Right? So definitely think about supporting internal mobility. And sometimes, you may get to a point where the right next thing for their career is outside your organization. Definitely support that as well. I know that's a kind of a shocking thing to say for most people, but it's the literal, that's how you think about developing talent and promoting women in tech. If the right next opportunity for them is outside your organization, don't be afraid to tell them that. All right, which kind of relates to this last thing that I want to say, which is open up your networks. Women sometimes don't tend to have as deep and wide networks as men do. Just to follow the two genders for just a second there. And there are various reasons, including, the gendered roles that we play in society, our commitments outside of work, so I won't go into all of that. But the fact is that men often have much bigger networks, professional networks. So if you see a woman that you're sponsoring, that you're mentoring, or just a peer of yours who could benefit from tapping into your network, definitely do so. Introduce them to people that they should get to know. Introduce them to people who can help them succeed, who can help be that sponsor if you cannot. So open up your networks. And this one is particularly important even before women enter the workforce. Right? Think about students, and they want to get into tech. Definitely share your expertise. Your perspectives are valid and they are valuable. But I would also add probably the biggest thing you can do for somebody, a woman wanting to enter the workforce, introduce them to other women in your network. We can offer them a much more balanced view of how things actually are and what it takes to be successful in tech as a woman. And so don't hesitate to apply that not just for your peers and the women who are already in the workforce, but especially also to those who are looking to enter the workforce. Connect them to other women in your network, and trust me, that will be a win-win situation. All right, so I've been talking quite a bit, and I think I'm doing pretty well on time. So those were the three things, and some of the tips. Hopefully, you found at least one or two that resonated with you that you can take back and implement. But before I let you go, we're going to do a little exercise. And we're going to answer this question: what is the biggest thing that you can do? But before we answer that question, we're going to do a little exercise. I want you to raise your hand if you're an ally. Of course, you're all here at this talk, right? I mean, you're here because you are an ally, you want to help. So yes, almost the entire room raised their hands. Do you mentor or sponsor a woman? Beautiful, about half the room. Thank you all. Do you participate in your organization's DEI efforts? I'm going to call that like what, half the room? Keep your hands up. Do you organize? any DEI efforts in your org? I want you all to turn and look at how many hands are raised. All right, now if you're a woman, lower your hand. The three of you, please stand up. 4, 5, okay, awesome. You don't get swag, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared. But you do get recognition and applause, and I honestly want to thank you for that, because the answer to this question, put in the work, right? I mean, do something. Don't just listen, don't be a bystander, don't think it's someone else's job. I can tell you the women in this room are tired. We have to really go above and beyond to be perceived as moderately competent at our jobs. We have responsibilities outside of our jobs. And then what happens at the workplace? Oh, you're a woman. You should put in some additional work to further DEI in our company. How do you think that makes us feel? Is it fair? Is it equitable? It's none of those things that we saw first. And the best part of that is, it doesn't even lead to career growth. That's the sad truth. We put in this work on top of everything else we do, and it doesn't even benefit us professionally. So for God's sake, or whatever you believe in, please put in the work, be a true ally. Start small. You don't have to go organize a massive company-wide event. Just focus on like your team or what you can control. Just even start with implementing some of the tips that I've been sharing with you. And just start small and kind of work your way up there. I have had a couple of people come up to me at work and say, I want to help, but I have all these ideas, but they're not really specific to helping women grow. They're just general ideas that I want to implement for helping people grow. Remember that slide about what women want? Well, we want the same things, right? So if you have ideas, go find the people who are actually implementing those in your organization, the DEI groups, the team member resource groups, and share those ideas with them and share your help. They will definitely welcome it, and there's no wrong answer. So just know that if you raise your hand to help, you will be well received, and actually you might get more than you bargained for. But yeah, don't hesitate to do that. So with that, I want to wrap up and stop for Q&A. This is me. If you liked what you heard, you want to learn more, you want to have a conversation, find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to all of you for just Q&A or just observations. And I would actually love to also hear from the women in this room to see if there are additional things that you would like to share with the audience. I am not, but thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And two, how can I get a sponsor? Because I face a lot of bias as far as even getting the job.
So the second part of that question was, how can I get a sponsor? And I face a lot of bias in my workplace. Like I said, sponsorship has to be earned. So what I would maybe think about is, first start with a leader. So essentially, you're looking for somebody who can have a material impact on your, positive impact on your career. So start with a leader who is 1, preferably 2 levels up, and think about what have I done in my professional career so far that has benefited that person, that has benefited their organization or their personal reputation in a positive manner, right? Start thinking about that. And if that helps you come to 1 name or 2 names, set up one-on-one time with them and have an open conversation about, this is what I have done so far in my career. This is kind of where I want to go. And you have seen me, or you have worked with me for these X number of months or years, and you have seen me deliver and perform strongly. And yet, I'm having some of these challenges, and I believe it may be because of bias, but I would like a neutral opinion on that. And so now you're kind of inviting them into the conversation, you're reminding them that you have done good things for them. And, chances are that this leader will give you their opinion, and very likely they will confirm what you're seeing, or they may give you a counter which you should think about. And then you can end that conversation with, can you help me advance in my career? I'm looking for somebody who can be that advocate for me, and would you be open to that? That's kind of how I would start that discussion. And the key there is finding somebody who can actually open doors for you, right? You don't want to pick someone who's like your peer, because their influence is going to be limited. So you want to think about your leadership chain and who can be that person for you.
How do you get people to, I feel like my biggest hurdle right now in my career is that I get ignored a lot, especially with like asynchronous, it's like all chats, it's not meetings. And I'll ask a question, and then it'll be like days, and no one will have responded to my question. So I'm feeling like invisible on my team right now. Like, what would you recommend doing?
So the question was, a lot of the communication happens async through chats, and her question often gets no response, and so she's starting to feel invisible. A couple of things there. So one is, first, confirm if it is just you or other people's questions are also being ignored. Because, we live in this world where, I love and hate Slack. My Slack is a train wreck. The number of unread, messages, and then I join all of these channels that, I may have just been curious about, and now there's just so much going on. And that's not unique to me, right? I'm sure all of you identify with that experience. And not only are we talking more async, we're also multitasking while we are doing things. And everybody's focused on what they want to get done. So it's very easy to miss a question in chat. So first is, I would say, confirm whether it's only happening to you or is it happening in general, because that will influence your next step. So by the way, I think as women, we also have this tendency to just assume the worst, that it's only happening to me, and therefore it must be something that I did or said. So check that bias, get that data. Let's say, if it is only happening to you, I would first start with your leader to say, hey, I think something needs to be fixed in our team culture here. I'm seeing this going on, and how can I help? And how can you help me? Because it is their role to build an inclusive team. It is their job, actually, to build an inclusive team, an equitable team. Now, if you saw that it was happening to more than just you, then your team has an even bigger problem, because many other people like you are feeling ignored and unheard, in which case it is all the more your leader's job to kind of figure that out. You can help surface it to them. You can also call for a meeting, or do you have stand-ups?
We have stand-ups, yeah, we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, or retros more appropriately.
No retros, just stand-ups.
Okay, well, there's a problem. If you're never reflecting on what you're doing wrong, how can you improve? So I would just make that. So don't even make it about you first. Make it about the team learning from what they did, and say, hey, I think it's a good idea to have retros. We should start doing retros. Now you pitched an idea that improves the whole team. And by the way, in that first retro, you're going to be like, I'm seeing a pattern where I'm asking these questions and people are not responding. How can we fix that? Right? So unfortunately, this conversation, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, when women are not heard, we have been conditioned over the years to start that conversation in an unconfrontational way. So you'll notice that I didn't tell her, go tell your team they're screwing up, they're not listening to me. I said, go tell your team, for their own sake, they need to do retros and use that retro as a mechanism to bring up your real concern. We are conditioned to do this, and it's one of the ways, reality being what it is, it's one of the ways we get to voice our opinions and actually have a chance of it being heard. I want you all to reflect on why that is and what you can do to change that. It is reality, though. Yep.
So I'm a student and I'm starting my job search soon. And I was wondering, is there anything I can start looking out for besides looking at a company's like DEI stats or things like that, or questions I could ask a company during interview where that I could see that they value the women on their team or in their company?
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome to the workforce very soon. Congratulations, and I wish you all the best in your in finding the right home for you. So some of the things that I like to ask are, definitely you should ask them about their DEI numbers, and they'll all have great stories to tell you. Ask them about how those numbers change with salary grades. How many women do they have at the top? Because what I've seen time and time again is the numbers look great at the entry level, and it's a tapering effect, right? Some of that tapering effect is due to, women may choose to drop out of the workforce for several reasons, but by no means is that the only explanation. So if somebody tries to give you that explanation, just call BS. But that would be one key question that I would recommend that you ask. How many people do you have in your C level, at your VP level? And then you can ask about what are you doing specifically internally to help the women that you have already attracted to the company grow. Companies are great at giving you the sales pitch and getting you in the door. And then once you're in the door, they are like, it's your job to grow now. Go figure it out. And by the way, also go attract more women talent. And good luck, right? You're on your own. So find out specifically what are they doing internally to help the women who are already there grow in their careers. So I definitely start with that and be aware of pay. So total comp rather than pay, I should say. Do your research. Talk to people in your network, talk to other graduates who are at companies that you maybe knew from college. Try and see if they'd be open to sharing comp information with you. I've generally found the newer generations of professional workers are very much open about comp. So I would do some research there and find out. Just protect yourself from that angle. I think we are 1 minute over time. I will take
I wanted
Dan.
to share, I wanted to share a non-quantitative answer to that. And my manager was posting our positions on this site called Key Values, and employers there aggregate, these are things that are important to our team, right? Do we do peer programming? We value these softer skills in our team culture? Might be something to check out that might not be surfaced on like LinkedIn or something.
Key Values.
Keyvalues.com.
Check out keyvalues.com. All right, thanks everyone. You've been great. Thanks for listening to me. Have a good rest of your day.